Hello everybody, welcome back to the workshop. Let me wipe my lens really quick. How's everybody doing? Hope you can hear me well. Thank you for the likes already, I appreciate that. Thanks for being here. Let me just wipe that lens off here so you can see me. What is up everybody? Sunday night. Tonight's stream will be brought to you by Throat Coat, which is a type of tea that rock stars drink so they can sing on tour and not destroy their throat. Not that I'm a rock star, but I want to talk a lot, so I want to make sure that I still have a voice. All right, I'm going to share some quick methods with you guys on how to do miniature brick. I know that everybody has their own style and way of doing it. I'm going to show you my style for general applications, and you guys should be able to go crazy with it and apply it to whatever you're doing in any scale by the time we're done here. And if you've never been here before, welcome to Art in Real Time. This is where I do art in real time, so you can see how long things really take to be done in detail, and you have a chance to ask questions as well. Thank you, by the way, to our channel members who are here. And I'm going to show you guys how to calculate scale, how we can sculpt and carve and texture foam, which is the EPS, Expanded Polystyrene Foam. This is basically the foam concept of how to do this with foam, which you can apply to different types of foam using different tools. We're going to focus again on Expanded Polystyrene Foam, which is this stuff. There's a link below if you'd like to get this exact sheet. This is 12 inches by 12 inches by 1/2 inch, roughly. It's 144 square inches, or 144, what is that? 144 square inches, or 50, 60, 72 cubic inches of, of expanded polystyrene foam. This is the same foam you can get at Home Depot. It is intended for home insulation, but it is wonderful for projects, for hobbies and projects and sculpting and doing all kinds of cool stuff. So we're going to work with this stuff tonight. If you don't have the pink stuff near you available or can't use the link below, you can go to Lowe's and get the blue stuff. It's the same foam. The Lowe's is a little bit crustier, which is fine. It will behave a little bitty bit different, but like 99% the same. I have noticed a slight difference in the density and texture of this blue foam, but it is the same chemical mix. So something about how they heat this up, or the ratios of whatever they're mixing to expand it, or whatever they're doing, a little bit different than this, but you can do the same stuff and apply the same techniques and get pretty much the exact same results with both of these foams. So we'll go over that. And I'm going to show you a bunch of different tools that I use. There will be links below for a few of those tools. Excuse me. And how you can use these tools. They're kind of all the same concept, and I'm going to show you sort of conceptually how you can do one thing and use any of these tools to do that same thing, so that you can use hopefully what you already have, or you can use what is available to you. Yeah, and so tonight I'm gonna use I made some friends to bring along. So this is Bricky. He's gonna help us tonight. He's usually pretty enthusiastic, so we'll have Bricky assist us tonight. And this is his friend Mason. Mason is always concerned because he's never sure if I'm gonna cut myself, because I use straight edges and sharp knives all the time. But I appreciate his concern. So this is Mason, and we have Red. He's not the smartest, he's not the sharpest tool in the shed, he's not the smartest guy, but he's always really impressed with what I do. So these three guys are going to help us out tonight with our scaling and our stacking. So let me go ahead and get into it. Actually, let me say hi to whoever's here as far as channel members. Where's my chat? What is up, everybody? I saw that somebody rejoined at Workshop, or joined at Workshop Builder on the members section. I appreciate that. I think that was Nihilerific. I saw that earlier. You did that quite a while ago. Michael Dumas, Nightwolf 3176, Fishnet Creative Studios, Fat Red Foo, Michael yeah, everybody's here. Bjorn's here, Rolando's here, Red Dog 5 is here. Everybody's here. 20 people are here. right now. All right. I'm sure more will show up as we move along. Yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say to get us started. Let me show you guys the tools we're going to use on this stream. If we have a little bit more time than I expect, we can do some other things, but this should cover most of what we have time for tonight. So let me flip this around and show you my crib. Okay, lots and lots of tools. Hello. Let me take a sip of my throat coat here in my J mug for Joiler's Workshop. Okay, so believe it or not, this, and this are all called squares. I know none of them are square, like the shape of a square, but they are squares. That's because they keep things square, or they help you keep things square. And square in geometric terms, in drafting terms, in engineering terms, can refer to just keeping things perpendicular and parallel, right? So a 90-degree angle, right? If we measure the angle between this line and this line, is 90 degrees. So that is a square corner, right? Because if you did 4 of those corners, it would make a perfect square. So we're referring to this 190-degree corner as a square corner. Same concept here with these. These are L squares with a ruler, excuse me, L squares with a level on the side and an edge, which is going to be very helpful for us. I'm going to put a link below for these if you guys want to get some of these, because I'll probably use this quite a bit on the first go. And you can get these in 3 different sizes. They're pretty affordable. They're made of aluminum, and they do the same thing as the triangular square here. They keep things square. You help you make things perpendicular and parallel. And then I have 4 different ruler sizes here. Let me bring you guys over here. I have a 12-inch ruler, an 18-inch ruler, a 24-inch ruler, and a 36-inch ruler. These are metal rulers, and they have a cork-lined bottom, all right? Metal rulers and a cork-lined bottom. That is so that they don't slide around, and I prefer these over plastic rulers. Sometimes the plastic rulers that are see-through are helpful, but in this case, just for doing like basic brick and carving, straight lines, the metal, I prefer the metal or hard, dense, construction-worthy plastic. This is also a square. This is a T-square, right? Triangle square, L square, T-square. This is the same thing. This goes 24 inches, centimeters on one side, inches on the other. This is great. Whoops. This is great for working. We're gonna use these smaller tools tonight, but this is the same excuse me, concept we would use with these smaller tools, but it will help you with a larger piece of foam like this. This is the project panels you get at Lowe's and Home Depot. They're 2 feet by 2 feet or 24 inches by 24 inches by 1 inch thick. You can also get 4 foot by 8 foot sheets, which are, you know, the size of giant sheets of plywood basically at Home Depot. I think they're $50 a sheet now. They used to be $18 a sheet, but now they're $50, but it's still a lot cheaper than buying one small one at a time if you have storage space. Because you're basically you're paying less than $1 a square foot even for that big sheet. So it's good if you plan on using lots of foam over a long period of time. I also use these extendable box cutters. I have my medium one I don't know where it is. This is a larger one, this is a small one. I have a link below for the medium one, which is the size I use the most. But for demonstration purposes tonight, I'll probably be using the small one right now the most. We also are going to use a X-Acto knife or a hobby knife to do some lots and lots of tiny cuts. For texturing, we're going to use wire brushes. You can get these at Harbor Freight Tools. This is like a grill cleaning brush or a scraping brush for like car parts. And this is kind of the same thing, but it's finer, made of brass. Both of these will do basically the same thing. I'll show you when we get to that point, when we do texturing. And I brought this out just to show you guys what this is. This is a engineering ruler. I used to use these a lot in high school when I did hand drafting for mechanical drafting or architectural drafting. You can get these in different scales that have different divisions on them. Right on the standard rulers here, we have centimeters and we have inches. But what this does is this divides up an inch into different increments, right? In imperial, we have 1 inch is divided by typically by 8ths on a ruler. So if you look at this ruler, we got 1, 2, so if we start between 1 and 2 right there, right? We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8, excuse me. 8ths of an inch, 2/8 is a quarter, 3/8 is 3/8, 4/8 is a half, 5/8, 3/4, and so on. That's how you divide up an inch on an imperial measuring device. And the other side, for all you folks in Europe or other parts of the world, we've got the centimeters, which does make more mathematically a little bit more sense. But most of you are in America, so we're going to use the America way tonight. But I will try to reference scaling down to centimeters as well to help. Yeah, and centimeters are usually divided up in tenths as well. So you have 1 centimeter there, that's divided up in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, gets you to the halfway point. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 gets you to the full centimeter. So 12 divided by 8 and 10 divided by, or 1 divided by 10. So obviously this makes a little bit more sense if you're trying to do quick math, but this is the one most of us are familiar with. And ironically, most action figures, because a lot of us, let's be honest, we're going to make these for doll houses or action figures. Most of the people that come to my channel are participating mostly in one of those types of hobbies. And majority of action figures are in 1/12 scale. And even though metric makes more sense on its own, imperial actually is faster for 1/12 scale because everything is already divided by 12 to start. Typically a 12 inches equals 1 foot. There's 12 inches in 1 foot, and most rulers go about 12 inches. So it's a little quicker, and you can go by inches faster because 1 inch equals 1 foot in 1/12 scale, right? Because, you know, well, I'll go over that in detail in a second, but that's the basic rule. So if you're doing something in 1/12 scale, imperial makes more sense. But the reason I brought out this engineering scale is to show you if you need to go really small or you want to try a different method for scaling, these can be helpful. See how this has 12 inches on it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. This is divided up on this one edge, just like a normal ruler, right? I can line this up and we've got it divided. But the one difference is, if I can line it up properly, it's not divided up by eighths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So this side, that's the engineering rule, see that number 10? This is 1 inch divided by 10 units. So if you want to divide inches up by tenths, this is what they do if they have a set of plans on a construction site. They'll get engineering rulers like this, and the plans will be scaled this way on a plan. So you get like 1 in 40. This one says 40. So this is every inch is divided up into 40 segments. So if you needed to know 40ths of an inch, you can get one of these. Here's 20ths of an inch, 50ths of an inch, and this one goes all the way up to 60ths of an inch. So if I take this 1 imperial inch and I hold it up here, this on the ruler is divided up into 16ths and 32nds. Those little tiny dashes go all the way up to 1/32. See how it says that there? This one is divided up into 60 divisions. So if you have a set of plans and the house is this big on the set of plans, it could be in 1 in 60 scale. That's what they call that, 60 in 1 or 1 in 60 scale. So that is what these are for, and that was very helpful if you need to do ultra small things. You can figure that out with one of these civil engineering or architectural scales. You can find these at like print shops that sell drafting equipment or online. They're usually shaped like this, so you actually get 6 different scales instead of 2. So I'm not going to use this tonight, but I thought that would be cool to show you guys in case you were curious, and you might have a use for that. I'm sure somebody out there in internet land will have a use for one eventually. I've used this a few times. Thank you guys for all the likes. I really appreciate it. Okay, I'm going to put away some of these big ones that we don't need. Like, I'm just going to be working with these tonight. The 12 inch, the 18 inch, and this is actually a 14 3/4 inch, the way that they size this. It's 40 centimeters or 14 3/4 inches in imperial. I probably won't be using this, and we'll set these aside. So here is foam, different measuring devices, these, Let me get a piece of, well, let's get a piece of graph paper and do this properly, shall we? Where did I put my graph paper? Say hi to the friends while I look for my graph paper. Hold on. Where did I put that down? Hello, Mr. Graph Paper. Ah, here it is. Boom. Okay. So I'm actually going to flip my stand around. Hold on one sec. Hello. So it's easier for me to adjust the camera. Okay. Bricky, Mason, and Red. Okay. Pencil for this part. Mechanical pencil. And we're going to do some maths. Just get a blank page here. Nope. Nope. There we go. Okay. All right, Bricky, we need your help. So if we want to scale something down, all right, we need to know what it is in real life, all right, to be able to scale it. And one thing I'm going to say is I'm going to show you how to fudge scale a little bit too, because sometimes it can be easier and it won't make a difference, but it's worth knowing the whole process, especially if you need to go into larger scales like 1/10 or 1/6 or 1/8 or 1/5, like studio scale models are, stuff like that. So we're going to measure Bricky, and we're just going to draw Bricky out here really quick. Draw me like one of your French girls. Okay, let me draw Bricky out here really quick. And he needs his beautiful little eyeballs and his adorable, adorable infectious smile. Okay, so I'm going to use imperial and centimeters. I'll draw them both out for everybody. So in imperial, he is 7 3/4 of an inch long. Right, that's where my fingernail ended up. So I'm going to actually, this is how you draft roughly an isometric view. This is an isometric view, by the way. This would be side, front, top, isometric. We're drawing isometric, just roughly. And what did I say? This is 7 3/4 of an inch. In centimeters, it is 19 and a half. 19 and a half centimeters. I'm going to do in brackets 19 and a half centimeters. And Bricky's width is, I can do it this way. Bricky is, how wide are you, Bricky? 3, technically he's 3 and 5, 10, 9/16, but we're not going to get that exact. So we're going to go 3 and a half. I'm going to round down a little bit. He was actually right there, but I'm going to round down for the sake of math. So I'm going to say he's 3 1/2 inches wide. And in centimeters, you won't have to do this every time you do a diorama, by the way. I'm just demonstrating in case you need to scale down a specific object or a specific piece of masonry or a stone or a door. So you can do this in any different, for any different object. He is 9 centimeters wide. Technically, he's just over 9 centimeters, but we're going to go 9 centimeters wide. 9 centimeters wide. And how tall are you, Mr. Bricky? Mr. Bricky is 2, well, he's 2 3/16, but we'll say 2 1/8. And in centimeters, 2 1/8, and in centimeters, he is 5, a little over 5 1/2. We'll say 5 1/2. So he is 2 1/8 or 5 1/2 centimeters. Okay, so let me just move this here so I have a better overall view of what's going on. Okay, so 1/12 scale just means we're dividing it by 12. So let's just do this first dimension here. I'm going to call this one A, B, and C. So A equals 7 3/4, and we're going to go divided by 12. B equals 3 1/2 divided by 12. C equals 2 1/8 divided by 12. Something that helps, by the way, doing math like this is to know your decimals. I just happen to know them, so 3/4 is also known as 3/4 equals 0.75. 1/2 is obviously 0.5, or half of a whole, and 1/8 is actually 0.125. So it's a quarter divided by a half, so that's 0.25. If you divide that by 2, that gives you 0.125, all right? I know I'm running through this kind of quick, but obviously you can go back and watch it again if you need to. Those are our formulas to get our actual scaled down size, okay? Measurement divided by 12, measurement divided by 12, measurement divided by 12. Now, if you wanted to use metric, you can plug in the centimeters, 19 1/2, 9, and 5 1/2. I'm going to do this whole thing, and then I'm going to show you a easier way to fudge it, because I think it's worth knowing both. Let me just pull up a calculator here really quick. Okay, calculator.net. Let's just do these really quick. And 7.75. See what I'm doing here? 7.75. That's my first measurement. Divided by 12 equals 0.6458. See how confusing this is already getting? I'm trying to prove a point here. 6458. All right, let's clear that out. 3.5 divided by, moving on to the next one, 12 equals 0.2916, or 2.2916, and then 2 1/8, so 2.125 divided by 12 equals I don't know why I have 4 equal signs here. Not sure how I did that. Okay, it's 0.1770. So to figure out what it would need to be in inches, you'd have to be able to reverse those decimals. Kind of confusing already, right? 0.645 is pretty close to 0.75, so we know 5/8 of an inch is 0.625. I'll write that in there. 5/8 of an inch is 0.625. So we know this is a little bit more than 5/8 of an inch because it's 0.645. 0.2916, that we know that a quarter of an inch is 0.25. So we know this is somewhere between a quarter of an inch and 3/8 of an inch, or a little bit bigger. So that's a little bit bigger than a quarter of an inch. And 0.17, we know that's a little bit bigger than 1/8 of an inch. That's kind of hard to remember, right? So I will typically, on a smaller scale, and I'm considering 1/12 scale, round my measurements up. What do I mean by that? So trying to figure out 3/4 divided by 12 and a 1/2 inch divided by 12 and a 1/8 divided by 12, and then scaling it back, which you can do if you need to do that, like say in a CAD program and you want to 3D print something. This is perfect for that, but usually CAD programs have scaling tools where you can just drag and drop or type in a value and you don't have to do any of that. For our purposes though, to figure out a properly scaled hyper-real looking brick, number one, we're just working on a facade today. So all we're trying to do is apply a face to this. We're not worried about the depth. So one thing we can eliminate is measurement B. We don't need measurement B for our purposes. That's one thing we can do to simplify it for ourselves. The other thing is, instead of saying 7 3/4, why don't we just round it up and say that A equals 8 inches? And say that C, instead of it equaling 2 1/8, why don't we say that C equals 2 inches? That's already simpler, right? So we divide those by 12. What do we get then? So this is our fudging. I'm giving you permission to fudge it. So 8 divided by 12 equals 0.66666. Dun, dun, dun. So that's about halfway in between. Here, let me do this. It's about halfway in between 5/8 of an inch and 3/4 of an inch. So that gives us a good ballpark idea of how big we can make it or how small we can make it. And then we take 2 divided by 12. Oops. Divided by 12. Gives us 0.16666. So 0.16666. Okay. Why am I showing you this? You could do all this complex math. Sometimes you will need to. And then this is for the demonstrationality of it, if that's even a word. But we know that this is either 3/4 of an inch if we round up, or 5/8 of an inch if we round down. So what I would tell you is make your bricks either 3/4 of an inch wide or 5/8 of an inch wide. Pick one. It's much easier than trying to measure out 0.6666 or 0.6458. Because in a smaller scale, your eye will not notice the difference of 0.021 between this and this. It's not gonna, that's so small your eye's not gonna notice. Now, if you're moving up into a larger scale, like 1/6 scale, it's gonna need to be twice this big. And the bigger you go, the more your measurements are off or fudged, the more the eye might notice it and the less real it might look. So this, I think, fudging it applies really well to 1/12 scale and smaller. But once you start going bigger, you do need to start being a little bit more precise. Otherwise, it might not look hyper real. If you're going for hyper real, which is what I'm always, well, usually going for, depending on the thing I'm doing. So again, with his 0.16666, 1/8 of an inch is 0.125. So this is between 1/8 of an inch. And if we are going, let me just go in really far here. So if we go down, it would be 1/8 of an inch. If we go up, it would be 1/4 of an inch. So 1/8 of an inch, I can tell you, looks way too small. This dimension is closer to 1/8 of an inch. So you would think if you're just going to round down to the closer value, you'd go to 1/8 of an inch. But I'll show you on this graph paper right here, this grid is spaced out in 1/4 of an inch. So just think about if your brick was 3/4 of an inch wide and 1/8 of an inch tall. This is 3/4, right? Because this is 1/4 of an inch, and 1/8 of an inch tall. This is why graph paper is helpful. That's a really wide and really skinny brick. Even if you shrink it down to 5/8 of an inch, which would be right here, right? There's your 1/2/8, 4/8, which is 2/4 or 1/2, plus your extra 8, that gets you 5/8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5/8. That's still a really skinny, wide brick. But, let me zoom out. If we go ahead with the bigger value here, and we just make it 1/4 of an inch by 3/4 of an inch, that kind of starts to look more like a brick, don't you think? This is where fudging it can actually be helpful. So it actually can look more real. So we go hyper accurate in 1/12 scale for making bricky actually 1/12 scale. It starts to look weird because of the scaling and actual dimensions. But this, when we take it and we turn it into an isometric view, so if I take this 1/4 inch by 3/4 and I drag my lines out here and I draw this, that looks more like bricky proportionately, doesn't it? Right? That looks a lot more like bricky. This one looks more like booky. The smaller one kind of looks more like a book, doesn't it? It's really skinny. So this is how I determined what dimensions I do 1/12 scale brick at. This is everything I went through when I started figuring all this out. So you're on the journey here with me, guys. So I usually make my brick, depending on how I'm feeling or the style I'm going for, either 5/8 of an inch or 3/4 of an inch wide, and 1/4 of an inch, or sometimes I'll go a little over 1/4 of an inch, 5/16 of an inch. That's a little bit higher. But these are standard dimensions I use. Most of the brick I do is 3/4 of an inch wide by 1/4 of an inch tall. But if I want to get very specific, because I'm going through for a certain style or time period, I might go a little smaller. Older brick tends to be smaller or more broken down with more mortar in between it. Newer bricks more bold. So it just, you got to think about these things, look at styles, practice a little bit, figure out what you like. And I say sometimes I accidentally go up, which a little bit more than 1/4 of an inch is 5/16 of an inch, is 1/4 plus a 16th gets you to 5 of those 16ths. So, excuse me, this actually looks even better to me too. And 5/16 of an inch, when you make it a little bit taller and a little bit wider than it should be, you're compensating for the mortar that you're going to put in between the lines. What do I mean? When you space everything out, let's just say we spaced everything out at 3/16 of an inch, right? I'm going a little bit smaller than 1/4 of an inch here. So let's say we went on this, we erred on the smaller side of my dimension over here, right? Instead of going up 1/4 or down 1/8, we went right in the middle, which is closer to this. And we do all these dimensions, and then I err on the smaller side on my width. I go with 5/8 of an inch, right? That puts my brick looking like this. We're going to carve this into foam. So we're actually cutting these lines into foam, and then we're going to fill them back in with spackling. If you haven't seen my how to paint hyper-realistic brick video, watch that after this, because that is how I show you how to do the detailed painting and finishing. But I didn't show the carving in the beginning of that video. Now we're doing the carving. But after this is done, go check that out and you'll see what I'm talking about, because we're going to go back and we're going to spread spackling paste in all these grooves that we cut, and it's going to make those little tiny grooves that are the size of the blade we cut it with, right? The grooves are going to be that thin, but we're going to go back and press mortar into the grooves, and that mortar is going to spread. So as we spread in mortar into all these grooves, it's going to change the size of the brick. So these are all the things you got to learn to take into account. And a lot of it just comes with experience. You don't have to know before you do it. You just kind of need to do it, and you'll go, oh, right? So this is going to shrink everything. So all these dimensions will get smaller in the finished product. So if you err on the side of all these smaller dimensions, everything will look a lot smaller, and it might not scale properly, and it will look weird. But if you err on the side, you fudge it, and you err on the side of going bigger, when you add in all that extra detail and the mortar and stuff on top of it, it will end up scaling much closer to these dimensions with the mortar in between at the end. Raise your hand if you're confused. I know, Red, I know you're confused. What about you guys? Are you confused? Mason is just concerned. He's just confused. That's okay. It'll make sense when we do it. But this is the key to understanding scaling and the types of things that you need to pay attention to if you're going for hyper-realism. You need to figure out not only accurate sizing from a real object so that it scales properly, but how the materials interact with one another so that when you're done, it looks real. Because if I just went with all the perfect numbers and I spent all that time measuring out every 0.16666 of an inch, and filling it all in, and then I go back and I paint it, and the paint adds a layer of thickness and density to it, and then I put the mortar over it, and the mortar fills it in, and then I look at it, I'm like, why do my bricks look like they're red books, like bookends? It doesn't look right. These are the things that you need to pay attention to, and that is why I'm showing you. So, enough of that stupid math. I'm going to show you how to do that fast. All right? I'm taking you through the entire process by which I figured out how to do all this so that you don't have to. And you can understand why I do it this way. Sometimes when you do something, Bricky here gets it. Sometimes when you do something, people question your method and they don't understand all the stuff that you've gone through mentally to get, and sometimes emotionally, to get to that in process. And they just go, I don't like that method. And you're like, well, maybe if you understood the whole reason I do it that way, you might like it, or you might want to try it. And that's what I'm presenting to you guys today. Thanks, Bricky. Okay, so this is our foam. And the traditional method I've seen a lot of folks do for carving brick is they will pick their brick height dimension, right, which we determined if we rounded up and fudged it was about 1/4 of an inch or 5/16, right? I could take my ruler, lay it down, and I could mark with a pencil or with my knife. I could go chick, 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 and mark my 1/4 of an inch, and then flip it around, and then mark my 1/4 of an inch, chick, 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 and then take my ruler and then cut every single line. I guarantee you if you do that, they won't be perfectly parallel. Because there are micro deviations in the edges of all these foam bricks. They're not, you're assuming if you do it that way, they came from the factory laser perfect, perpendicular, square, and parallel, and they're not. They're actually a little bit off. So you want to pick the straightest side and just go off of one side. I'll show you what I mean. So instead of marking, drawing those lines, you can do that, but you'll find, and I'm sure you have if you've done this before, when you go line by line, you might get 15 lines in, pick up your ruler, and be like, wait, it kind of looks like it's starting to fan one way. Or there's a couple lines that are like this or like this. That's because even with your most careful measuring too, number one, the edge is not perfect. And when you go and do a point, drag, cut like that, the thickness of your knife or whatever tool you're using or pencil is going to vary, 1/64 of an inch to the left or to the right of your measurement. And as you stack up your lines, they're going to deviate at an angle back and forth or front to back, and it's going to fan out and maybe not be as perfect as you want. No method is perfect unless you throw it onto a CNC mill, which most of us don't have access to. I know some of us do, so good for them. If I had one, I'd probably use it too, or a laser cutter. But this is how to do it the fastest way that I have figured out thus far by hand without any type of like ultra special tool, with just regular tools that most of us have. So first sheet I'm going to show you is if we want all of our brick to be roughly 1/4 of an inch, and I say that on purpose because I'm not going for perfectly 1/4 of an inch. That's a trap. Don't try to be perfect with every measurement, except that they might all be a little bit different, but you need the lines to be as parallel as possible. The thickness of this ruler, this is going to come in really handy, is perfectly divisible by 1/4 of an inch. What am I talking about? Let me show you. So this is my cutting mat here. If I take this and I plop it, well, I'll do it in the middle here. If I start on one of my inch lines and I put this right here, and I put this right here, look at that. That's landing on the 1/2 inch mark, which means I could divide this width up by 1/4 of inches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are 6/4 of inches in here, right? Which means there are 6 rows. This is 6 rows of miniature brick thick. Think about that. This is the same height as 6 rows of brick equally or equidistantly. I'm going to show you why that matters. So I don't have to measure every single line. So I'm going to find, this is why having this edge on this can be very helpful. You can go like this and it will stay in place and won't scratch anything. So I'm going to drag my ruler up to the edge here and see how this is pressed up against this, and I slide this up to this. That's actually pretty straight. This, I think I just picked the right edge. You see how that edge is nice and equidistant all the way down? That's a good edge. Some of these factory edges, though, if you go to them, that one's a little off. It's a little bit bigger on this end than on that end. It's hard to see. But go around until you find the straightest edge, because then you know this line and this line are as perpendicular as they can get, which will help you, like this one's off. So this edge is off against this edge. It's tighter up here and wider down here by like 1/16 of an inch. So if I do my lines off of this edge and I trace them all the way down using this ruler, they're all going to look like they're fanning to the right, because this angle is wider than 90 degrees down here. Down here, it's like 91 degrees or 90.5 degrees. I'm going to go back to that first line I had because that looked like it was very straight. This one, yeah, that's like pretty much perfect. So what we're going to do is I'm going to abut the edge right to, try to find the best angle for you guys. I'm going to abut the edge of this tool right to the edge of the foam, which I know is very straight according to this 90-degree angle. Take my ruler and I'm going to drag a line. And I'm going to slide this up, and I'm going to line this back edge of this against this line. And I'm going to drag another line. And I'm going to keep doing this all the way across. You'll see how fast this goes once we get started. I'm going to flip this around. Another advantage of this tool. I am pressing the tool flat. See, it's angling down over here because of the weight of the L side, the short L. I'm just going to push it like that. All right, and we've already got lines, and we're like, wait a minute, that's too big. No, it's not. So this can be each segment can be divided into 6 more segments. So what I'm going to do is I am going to measure, but I'm only going to measure every other segment. You'll see why. Because using this method, you can do them twice as fast. So I'm going to come in here with my ruler, and I'm going to start on the side that I started on, the same leading edge or same main edge. Get my hand under here. And I'm going to, so this, because I traced my lines on the outside edges, each space ended up a little bit wider than 6/4 of an inch. It ended up like 6/4 of an inch plus a 1/16, so that's okay. We're just going to fudge it. What I'm going to do with my knife, you can do this with a pencil if you want to. I don't recommend a pen because pen marks don't really clean off this, and they bleed through paint. I'm going to mark every 1/4 of an inch. But I'm going to do that on the first space. I'm going to skip this space, go to the next space. And I'm going to put my 3 on this line just so I'm starting from a clean 1/4 of an inch mark, and I can just mark every 1/4 of an inch. See how I'm doing that? This first one is marked quarters. This next one is marked quarters. I'm going to skip this one, go to this one. And I'm going to skip this one, go to this one. Okay. So I marked less than half of the total width. All right. I'm going to put you guys over here so I can use my proper hands, and then I'm going to line up my edge on my marks here. And watch this. Instead of just doing this side, I'm going to also do this side. And then I'm going to slide it up to my next mark. And I'm going to do this side. And I'm also going to do this side. Next mark. Do this side. I'm also going to do this side. Slide it up to my next mark. Do this side. Also going to do this side. Next mark. Look at that. Look at all those lines I just drew. Let me finish it. See how long it takes me. See how quickly I did that? My whole thing is covered in my main lines, right? So you can see how, obviously, we're 47 minutes into the stream here, and I've spent like 35 minutes just explaining things, and I started off a little bit slow. So if you already know this technique, you can just dive in, and I did 144 square inches of half of the brick cuts already in, what, like not even 10 minutes? So you can see how this actually moves pretty quick if you use these techniques. Now this ruler is perfectly divisible by 1/4 of an inch. This ruler is not as wide. You can see that there? But you can still use the same technique with this ruler. You just have to fudge it so they're either a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller. So you drew the same thing here where you can trace both sides, trace both sides, trace both sides. Mark your divisions so they're equidistant, right? So mark the divisions of this equidistantly. Put this down on the line, cut both sides, put this down on the mark, cut both sides, put this down on the mark, cut both sides. Same thing, right? So you can still use the smaller ruler or even a slightly wider ruler and get the same effect. You just have to divide the width of your ruler so that it's equidistant according to the height of the brick that looks good to you in the scale you're working in. So you can do this in any scale. You just need to know roughly the math that you need to be starting with or looking for. You need to know that you want your brick somewhere around 1/4 to 5/16 of an inch tall. Well, I know with this ruler, or with this square and with this ruler, if I use this method, my brick will be right in that pocket, give or take 1/16 of an inch. And to the eye, at this small of a scale, it will look hyper real and perfect. Again, if you go bigger in scale, you may need to be more precise, but you can still use the same method. You might have to create a ruler, like out of a piece of plastic or a piece of metal or a piece of wood to do the same thing that creates that equidistant division between the two sides that scales properly. Like if you were doing this in 1/6 scale, get yourself a ruler that is 3 inches wide and divide that up, and it might be a little bit faster for you. Also, when you go bigger, you can cut less lines. They just need to be more precise lines. So in 1/6 scale, even if you were taking time to be more precise, it will still probably take you the same amount of time because you're doing half as much work, but more precise work. If that makes sense. That doesn't get it. Okay. Let me take a sip of my throat coat here. Hold on one sec. Doesn't seem to be working very well. Okay. The next step is determining brick pattern. All right. I need some help from the helpers in the background here. Bricky, red, and mason. So, common types of brick patterns. You can do a Google search if you want and come up with this. So these are ones that you see commonly in stuff built in the last 100 years, anywhere around the world. The running pattern is the one most of us do. The common pattern is actually pretty nice because it just provides a little bit of visual interest. So, excuse me, every 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 layers, instead of dividing it up in the running pattern, you just equidistantly cut square shapes, right? And it provides a little bit of a difference. The English one is every other. This is a lot more cuts and a lot more work. This is the simplest one to do. Obviously, that looks good too, especially like on the outside of modern buildings. This looks really nice, or office buildings. Flemish, that one's confusing as heck. I've tried it. It's fun to do and it looks nice when it's done, but it takes a lot more mental energy to make sure you don't cut in the wrong place. This is the nicest, simplest look and best looking, I think, and it's also the simplest to do, aside from this standard stack bond pattern. But there's other patterns you can look up with incorporating other sizes, throwing cinder block in there. You can see how you can take this idea and run with it and create all types of different brick patterns. But we're just going to do the running one now because it's what most of us need to do. So our Marvel wants me to do he's been a member for 22 months and he wants me to do a herringbone pattern. No. Herringbone, that involves angles and 45 degrees and all kinds of stuff. We'll do that eventually, but That is a pattern for another stream, because that's a doozy. That's probably when I'll have to record and do, because I probably won't explain it well live, because it's just, there's a lot of, yeah, I'll do what I'm doing right now. I'll get lost. I'll get confused like red here. All right. Mason, red, and bricky. Oh, I brought them over here because I was going to show you the running pattern. So the running pattern is just where you divide the next layer and center it on the bottom layer. So you center the brick on the bottom layer. So the running pattern would be like this, right? So the brick above is centered on the division below. Your stack bond is like that. You can even do staggered, which I've actually done where it's not split 50% in the middle, which actually is really beautiful, and I do like it. So if you, I see your questions, guys. Hold on a sec. So if you wanted to do an offset pattern, it's really tricky, but you could try it, where you go every third of a width, right? That's about a third of the brick. 1, 2, 3. And then what you would do is you would stack it up like this. So you go 3 up, and then you'd go back 3. And so you'd actually have a pattern that involves 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 unique brick lays before it repeats again. And that's actually really, really pretty when it's done. I've done that once before on a big wall. Turned out amazing, but it does take more time because you have to do more divisional measuring, and that you can get really confused with that stacking method if you don't start in the right place and count every 3 or 5 lines depending on how you stack it. Think about it later after we do this. It'll probably make sense, but it's hard to do just because it's easy to lose track of your pattern if you're not paying attention. That's the stuff that slows you down. Doing more complex patterns, that's the stuff that can really slow you down. All right. Put these gawkers back over here. And let me look at the questions really quick before we move on. Eduardo Limoyero, what's going on, man? Fat Red Foo understands. I had a lot of lurkers today in the chat, or in the stream, but thanks for being here, guys. Thanks for all the likes again. I appreciate that. Pat Stoughton, I work in 1/48 scale. Do I just use your dimensions and scale it down? Yeah, 1/48 scale would be, what is that, 3 times smaller than 1/12. So if you take my dimensions and divide that by 2, and then divide that by 2 again, right? If you divide it by 2, you get 1/24th. And you divide that by 2, you get 1/48th. That's really small. 1/48th, what is that, HO scale or something like that? And I think that's what, train set scale, or normal train set scale. So let's do that really quick before I move on, just to show you if you're doing brick. Yeah, I think that's train set scale, right? Or most train set scale. Yeah, it is, Duff, man. It's going to be a heavy diorama. Okay. So, what did I say? 8 inches by 2 inches, or 3/4 of an inch by 1/4 of an inch. So if we go 3/4 by 1/4. Hold on. There we go. 3/4 by 1/4 is 1/12 scale. Whoops, not 1/2 scale. 1/12 scale. And dividing this in half to get down to 1/24 scale. Sorry, I'm going right to left here. My apologies. 1/24 scale would get us down to 3/8 of an inch by 1/8 of an inch. That's in half. So this would be 1/24 scale, right? I'm just dividing that in half, dividing that in half. And if we do that again, we're going to get to 3/16 by 1/16. Sorry. Erase that line up above. So 1/48 is going to be 3/16 by 1/16. Makes sense? And we're dealing with a ratio here. That's another way you can do it. 1/4 to 3/4 is a 1:3 ratio. If you guys remember how to draw ratios, these are all 1:3 ratios. So whatever, if you figure out one of the dimensions, this is another trick for quickly calculating. If you figure out one of the dimensions and you know the ratio, you can figure out the other dimension. So if you know 1/48 scale, your brick line divisions that I did need to be 1/16 of an inch, like all of these line divisions in 1/48 scale would need to be a 1/16 of an inch apart, which would be 4 times the amount of lines we have here. You're going to love this in 1/48 because this will be very difficult in 1/48. But you would need, if you know it needs to be 1/16 of an inch, you can just times 16 by 3 and get 3/16 of an inch. So you know it's a 1:3 ratio for this. So obviously you can fudge that though. If you need to make it easier for yourself, go a little taller, go 1/8 of an inch, but just go smaller on the width. Go 1/8 of an inch by 1/4 of an inch, you know, something like that. Fiddle around if you're going to do this in foam. But in the foam, once you go smaller than I would say 1/32 scale or 1/36 scale, it's going to get really hard because you see how tiny this is. You know, that's pretty tiny. So if you're doing a giant wall of brick, you know, for like a big old train station or something, that's going to be tedious. But if you're just doing some small walls, you know, maybe for some small buildings, that might not be a big of a deal. And if you're doing a one big sheet of it, if you just do a huge sheet of it at once, then you can cut your walls out of that sheet because you've done so much in that scale already. If you do a whole wall, 12 by 12, you know, foam in this tiny little brick, you could cut your walls out, and because that's like 3 or 4 buildings worth of walls, you know, in 1/48 scale, depending on the size of your buildings. So as you scale it up, you have to go bigger, but there's less work. As you scale it down, there's more work up front, but you can get more buildings out of it. So there's a give and take, obviously. All right. Excuse me. So for the running pattern that we're going to do, this is where we do need to make sure we pay attention to our measurements. Start down here. Duffman dioramas, if you want to get a hold of Owens Corning and ask them for us, you go right ahead. If you get that, if that happens, then I will sing your praises on every stream. If you can get them to pre-cut the foam for us like that, woo, that's a game changer. Obviously, the math applies to any material. You can do this in clay with carving it. You can do this in foam. You can do this in floral foam. You can do this in styrofoam. You can do this in any soft medium that you can be carved. You can carve away dried clay, whatever you want to do, right? I've seen artists, especially in Europe, they don't have as much access to this type of foam in certain parts of Europe. They don't use it because it's either totally not approved by their EPAs, their environmental protection agencies, because it's toxic, or can be considered toxic if used improperly, or they just don't have access to it. And so they do it with clay. A lot of people over there will just literally, they'll lay out a sheet of clay and they'll do the same basic method, but instead of cutting it, they'll get like a carving edge for like doing small sculpting, and they'll just sculpt it out, right? They'll do that. So that's another method. I'll do that eventually on one of these streams or on one of my videos. I just haven't found a good diorama where I felt like clay felt right for the look, but I have some of those coming up. So, okay, this is the part that gets really tedious no matter what you do, but it's actually not as time consuming as people make it out to be. It just seems like it is. So going back to our lovely L square here, we're gonna, before we use that, we are gonna mark. So this is when we're gonna mark again, but we're gonna mark the width of our brick on the first run and on the second run, okay? And I'm only gonna do it on one side, okay? So I'm going to put my ruler here and mark every 3/4 of an inch. I'm gonna basically do my first cuts here. If you don't like the look of this, you can obviously go bigger or smaller. As I said, budget how you like it. And inversely, if we were going into 1/6 scale, instead of going 1/4 inch by 3/4 of an inch, you would go 1/2 inch by 1.5 inches. But I do know from previous experience, once you scale up like that, it actually doesn't look exactly right. It looks a little bit, the proportions do look a little off when you go bigger. So that's where you might want to do the perfect math on that, which I think the perfect math on that is closer to like five, what is it? No, half an inch, 4/8, 4/8, 8/16. It's like 7/16 by like an inch and 5/8, or an inch and 5/8 is like closer to a 1/6, something like that. But do your own math and determine it yourself. Don't just take my word for it, because I could be off. I haven't had to do 1/6 scale brick in a long time. I do so much 1/12 scale. I'm basically just cutting my first row here. You see how this is a little bit tedious. I calculated one time, I think in, I did this on a 24-inch by 24-inch sheet, and I think it was something like 1,400 cuts that I had to make. So no matter what you do, you're going to make a lot of cuts. It's unavoidable. So here's our first row, every 3/4 of an inch. I'm going to mark the next row too, every 3/4 of an inch, or well, I'm going to start off at 3/8 of an inch, which is half of 3/4 for my first cut, and go. And then I'm going to start from that point and mark my 3/4 of an inch, which is halfway in between. Actually, you know what? I'm not going to do that. I'm going to show you a cheat. I just remembered. I'm over-explaining here, so I'm overthinking. Okay, so that is the pattern that we're going to go for, right? And you notice how I didn't cut all the way down to the line, because if I do cut all the way down to the line, I'm likely to cross the line. As long as you get really close to the line with your cut, where you drag it back, it will do what we want. Or you can come back and do all your cuts again the other way, like that. Thank you, Single Songwriter, and thanks for being here. Sharon is Zamboni. It sure is phone time. Okay. So double check. Okay. So I've marked my line here. No. Sorry. Mark the other side. Ugh, confusing myself. Okay. So just going to mark the first row. Sorry, guys. The first row every 3/4 of an inch. And then what I have to do is I have to count every other row to get to my top row, because every row is not going to be marked the same. So 1, skip 1, 2, skip 1, 3, skip 1, 4, 6, 7, 8. I need the odd number. 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. So this should be my top row. Let me just check again. Over, skip, 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 skip. I did that wrong, so glad I checked. Okay, so every 3/4 of an inch up here. And it's okay if you mess up the placement of one of your lines. Don't freak out, because hopefully I will mess something up here and show you how to fix it. Yes, you can fix it. And I will demonstrate. If I don't mess up, I will show you how to fix a mess up. When you do a mistake like that, you can turn it into either weathering or an opportunity to add detail. You could even cut bricks out and replace them. So if you're a perfectionist and you mess up like one small dimension on your wall and you think, oh my God, I ruined the whole thing, I have to start all over. You don't. You can utilize that as an opportunity to add more interest to the piece, depending on the look you're going for. So if you're going for old and weathered, you can add more weathering and detail. If you're going for new, you can add more overlay. If you're going for a certain style, you should, you can plan out before your layout. Yada, yada, yada. Okay, so first line, last line in the same pattern. So every other one, I figured out where that ended up. Doro 626, a lot of people use printed rollers. They don't get as hard of a detail in this. The lines don't sink as deep, and so that might be a style you want, though. So if you run a roller over this, you might want a subtler looking brick or stone. It actually works great for stone, but I noticed for brick, the lines don't go in as deep, and you have a lot less control over the finished look. But that actually might work for certain styles of brick. I don't use those because of that on foam. On clay, those brick rollers are a godsend. So if you lay out the clay and then roll it on, it looks great on the clay. That's another quick way to do clay brick. But for foam, it's really hard to get a detailed pattern in foam, unless you're doing a more ambiguous pattern like stone. Masonry, hard to do with a roller in foam, but rock and rubble and cobblestone actually works. It looks nice. But I feel like something as precise as masonry, it's hard to do with a roller. That's just my opinion. I know there's plenty of people out there that do it and are totally happy with it. So, you know, do your thing. So this is why I don't measure typically. I just showed you guys. It's hard to see on camera, but if I measure here, it's wider on top, even though I measured 3/4 of an inch. So if I do this, we're at 3/4 of an inch. If I go up here, it's just a hair over 3/4 of an inch. But now for this part, we're going to use an X-Acto knife. And this is where switching from the extendable box cutter to the X-Acto knife, it actually benefits the process if you do this, because then you're less likely to overcut. This is where it requires your mental focus and patience to not mess up or go out of order. There's no really fast method I've thought of to do this better than I'm about to show you. So we know we've got this bottom one here, so I don't go to the next one. I skip it and go to the one after that. So 1 skip, 2, 1 skip, 2 skip, skip 1, drag a line, skip 1, drag a line, skip 1, drag a line. And once you get in the rhythm, you can go really quick with this, and you get used to the muscle memory of where your blade needs to stop so it doesn't overcut. You're bound to do a couple of overcuts no matter what you do, but as long as they're not dramatic, you can kind of ignore them. After you fill in the masonry and add weathering and paint, they kind of disappear, unless they're really dramatic. See, and look at that. I was wrong. My counting was off. I'm going to show you how to fix this and have it look cool. So there is that first line, and you see all my lines here. I just cut with that, and I'm not worried about them going perfectly to the edge. Like this one stopped short a little bit. That's okay. With the last step, that's going to disappear. So this is where we got to do the tedious work again. So now I can reference visually where I cut last time. These marks, instead of having to count over, that first one is really the tricky one though. There we go. There's that line. All right. Now I'm going to go ahead and move a little bit quicker here. Just now, I think that you guys get the idea here. Okay, let me go a little bit quicker. To the 40 of you watching, thank you for the likes. I appreciate it. Thanks for being here. It's another reason, like I said, I don't measure, because if I use my marks, I'm off, or if I can be off. But if I measure in on both sides, but if I start on one side and I just line it up visually, I'm usually better off on that first run, and then I can reference my measurement for the rest of it. Okay. Pay attention to your X-Acto knife too. If you might notice that your hand wants to pull to one side. I know my hand likes to pull away from the ruler for some reason, so I sometimes have to angle my X-Acto so it's towards the ruler a little bit instead of straight, because I'll pull away a little bit, if that makes sense. I noticed I did it a couple times on these cuts. It's not going to make a huge difference unless you do the whole piece that way. 1 or 2 is not going to be noticeable, but if you do the whole piece that way, it's going to look like every brick is a parallelogram instead of a rectangle. We're going to do this whole wall together, guys, just so you can see the process in real time. And again, for those of you watching on the replay or in the future times, thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. This is art in real time, and this is how long it really takes. I mean, it'd be faster if I wasn't talking and I was listening to some cyberpunk lo-fi or something, or some cool podcast, or listening to an audiobook. Probably be going a lot faster, just like you will. So don't get discouraged and think, oh, I don't have time or patience for that. It goes faster when you're listening to something and not talking, and you get in the zone. You kind of tune out and time just slips away. And then your wife's calling you at 11 p.m. going, honey, did you die? No, dear. I'm at the workshop, existing outside of time and space. I'll move the camera angle again here in a minute too, just so it's not so boring. Bricky, 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 can't you see? Sometimes your bricks just hypnotize me. And I just love your bricky ways. Guess that's why they broke and you're so paid. I don't know why that popped into my head, but it did. Bricky, bricky, bricky. Hypnotized by Bricky. You see I started from the bottom and went up. Now we're going to start from the top and go down just to show you a different way to do it. You must become your own CNC mill. To work like a CNC mill, you must think like a CNC mill. Get in the zone. Almost there. Tediousness, tediousness. Give me a tedious, give me a tedious. Break me off a piece of that tediousness. Alright, let's do a new angle. Whoops, there we go. Sorry about that. Tediousness, tediousness. Break me off a piece of that tediousness. Sorry, the screen freezes when my camera goes, you have some battery left, blah, blah, blah. Sorry about that. It's all good, we're all here still. We're all fine now, down here still. How are you? We're sending a squad up. Nope, big reactor leak, gotta lock it down. Who are you? What's your operating number? Anybody else thinking moving quotes? I know I do. I promise this is funner with music in the background. But it's really that first step and then knowing how to do a quick pattern with your ruler that makes this a fast process. It seems like it takes forever because of how tedious it is, but it's really not that long of a process. Doing a whole wall like this, in this running brick pattern in 1/12 scale, if I wasn't talking, 35 minutes, 40 minutes, something like that, even with texture and all that. Copyright strikes. Do, 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 do. And uno más, por favor. Almost there, almost there. Do, 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 almost there. There's a plane flying over. Do, 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 do. Okay, cool. That is half of the cuts we need to do. See? It's so pretty. Do, 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 do. Soldier what? Okay. Add my own music to the live streams. That is an idea that I forgot about. Because I am sick of YouTube copyright claiming me incorrectly and me having to dispute those copyright claims with music that I wrote myself. Drives me nuts. It's really annoying. Okay. Let me go like this. So for this secondary one, I literally just visualize it. So this is, again, in the spirit of not measuring, right? We have our second row. It's going to be we did the odd rows, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. Now we're going to do the even rows, 2, 4, 6, 8. I just visually will mark the middle in between these on the first row. So I will go in here and just, I won't measure. I'll just look in between these two cuts I did and cut the next row. Look in between, cut the next row, look in between, cut the next row. You can trust your eyes on this one because it's a small dimension. You know, you're gonna likely get within a 32nd of an inch of the middle. So don't think you need to measure the next row. That really only is necessary in a bigger scale. In the smaller scales, once you have your first set of rows laid out in the odd numbers, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, those 2, 4, 6, 8s, you can just visually split them. And then you have your reference for all the other cuts. So now I visually split them. Here, let me do that. Down here, I'm gonna just line up my ruler on that split. And I'm going to just visually check I'm aligned up evenly over here, and all these cuts I did in those rows look like they're equidistant to this side of the ruler. Actually, I'm going to adjust it a little bit more this way on the top. Make sure those look even, and then I'm going to go 2, 4, 6, 8. Who do we appreciate? 2, 4, 6, 8. Who do we? Blah, 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 blah. Okay, so there it is. There's the next row. And you just continue that pattern off of the reference marks you cut. And just kind of visually, because you have so many lines now that you can check. That is a loud plane. There are so many lines now that you can check that you've created on this piece of foam that you don't need to measure every single cut you make. You can just tell, by your eye if your ruler is like this or just a little bit off. You'll be able to tell because there's so many points of reference that you can check against visually. So that's why less measuring on this can be good. If you can minimize measuring, you probably it'll be a faster process and still look just as good as if you had measured with a laser level. So again, I'm just visually lining everything up, like I said, using this side, these cuts I just did as my reference, and just going every other one. Cut, 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 cut. Same thing here, just go into the next line, visually lining it up so that it looks even. Cut, 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 cut. anybody's counting how many cuts I do, I'm sorry for you. It's like I said on that one piece I did, I calculated, I was probably off by a few, but I calculated that I had cut, I think 1,444 cuts for the size that I was doing. It was great. Moving right along. It's not as hard as you think it is. And moving along, moving along. Hope everybody's been doing well, by the way. I know I've got some comments about not having a bunch of live streams lately, but hey, life happens. I hope life is happening good to all of you, and if it isn't, I'm sorry. It'll get better. It'll pass. Cultivate a good attitude. Cultivate contentment. Cultivate appreciation for what you do have. If you look at human history, poor people today are more well off than rich people 80 years ago. Like, seriously, if you think about it, the stuff that you have access to, if you're on the lower end of the income spectrum, you've got more going for you than most people in the world, let alone rich people from 80 years ago. So, perspective, gratitude, contentment, focusing on what's really important. And I mean that. Foam brick walls and action figures, they're not really important. They're secondary. So make sure you don't let this ruin your life. If you're having a hard time, stressed out by somebody in the community, don't let it ruin your life. It's not worth it. I realized I kind of undercut those a little bit, so I'm just going back and correcting those. It's not worth it. The world is a crazy place without any of that. We don't need to make it any crazier. Human kindness, compassion, mercy, understanding, not only for other people, but for your own heart, goes a long, long, long way to inner happiness. Because that is what you'll want in the end. So we might as well cultivate it now. Right? It's hard. I have bad days. I get it. We all have bad days. There's things we can't control, and we can't get so overly anxious about the things we can't control to the point we stress ourselves out and start taking out on other people. And I think that's the fault of a lot of our imperfect minds these days. We're stressed out beyond things we can't control and things we wish we could control, and that makes us angry with our fellow man. There's not a lot we can do about that except make miniature foam brick dioramas. And I'll say for my part, having something sort of meditative, repetitive, simple, menial like this to do, very relaxing, very calming. Find something that does that for you. Reading, music, listening to the audiobooks, depending on the audiobook, you know, if it's a stressful audiobook, that's not good. I just started the Barsoom series. If you guys don't know what that is a series of books in Edgar Rice Burroughs novels focusing on John Carter of Mars, the original stories. And I read parts of them and read synopses and reviews, but I never fully just sat down and read them. So I recently started that. I'm actually enjoying it quite a bit. The language in the English is definitely dated, so keep that in mind. I think he wrote those back in the turn of the century, but it is still it's a fun adventure novel. It's really, really cool. At least the first book, where I'm still at, is a lot of fun. A couple of Sundays ago, Mrs. Euler's workshop and myself and some friends, we went to go visit an alpaca farm. We needed a break to de-stress a little bit, and it's amazing how well nature does that for you. So we went to go feed some alpacas, and we ate some Balinesian food. There was a Balinesian food truck there, and we had the time of our lives for about 2 hours. Just hanging around with skittish alpacas and alpaca babies, feeding them weird pellet food. And it was freezing cold, but it was one of the most beautiful views of Washoe Valley, hanging out with people you care about in nature. It's amazing like how much people don't think about stuff like that, how refreshing it is. So get on Google and look for your local llama or alpaca farm. Go feed some llamas. That's very calming. Almost done. Almost there. After a while too, your eyes can lose focus and you can start to flip it around. I did this last one. You can start to lose focus and your eyes can like go like out of focus, like a magic eye effect. Sometimes you have to back yourself away from the piece and then start again. Sometimes when I'm doing a big sheet, I have to do that. There it is. There is our sheet of brick. Let me move my camera here. What do you guys think? Huh? Oh, they feel the same way that they did 20 minutes ago. Okay, so that is the hard part over. And obviously I'm, what, an hour and a half in here, but 50 minutes of that was explaining things. So thank you, Charles Shahid. So the next step is texture and realism. And there's two things you can do. There's two basic things. So this is also a point at which you, for your diorama or whatever you're going for, can make some important decisions. If you want this to be, there's different types of brick, right? There's brick that has a lot of texture. There's brick that has no texture and it's just flat. There's brick that's old, that's falling apart and crumbling. You can make some decisions now that will affect if your brick will look like one of those as you do this. The main one is if you want, how deep you want to score the lines here. And what I mean is, let me grab my pen. A lot of people will use a toothpick for this part. I actually prefer a pen because I just like the divot it puts into it. You can use a toothpick though if you want, because it has a different look. Again, that depends upon you and what you want in your finished product. But I'm just going to use a ballpoint pen. I find that it does exactly what I need every time I do it. So we're going to go back through all those lines and trace them again really quick. But we're just going to stick it in there and do this. See that? That did not draw a line. That indented my score. And this is what I was talking about when we go back and we fill in these score marks or these line marks or these detail marks. That's going to get filled in, and it's going to fill in this gap here and spill out a little bit. So that's going to shrink the dimension of the brick after we do this. But this is important because it adds dimensionality and difference and layer to the brick. There's another way we can do brick involving a hot tool where we can get a thicker separation. I will show that in a future video. But this is the quickest, most efficient way to get hyper-realistic brick. And I like the pen method. I like the thickness of division that I get in there with it. So we're just going to make sure you have your pen pushed down too when you start. If you have it not pushed down, you could drag your pen across and you could drag a line across your brick. That's something that's really hard to fix and you can't really fix, especially if it's a big drag. That might not look like you want unless you're putting something over it. In which case, if you're putting something over it that's that big, you probably shouldn't spend all that time carving the brick. But that's just one cautionary thing with this pen. So you push the pen in and then push down and drag. It goes really quick. There's that part of it. And yeah, Star Marvel, this is why I'm showing this on the channel, just this feature, because it does open up a whole world to people who are, especially who are new to this, who have never attempted brick before. You can do all kinds of stuff with these methods and techniques too. It doesn't just apply to brick, this applies to adding detail into foam, period. So I'm glad you say that. Thank you for sharing that. That has been just about everybody's experience that's ever done this. It's worth doing, even if you don't plan on doing a lot of brick. It's worth doing at least once to understand how tools interact with foam, how foam feels when you work with it, how you can manipulate foam. It's worth the process. Okay, we're gonna do the same thing for all of our little cuts, but again, this goes pretty quick. So you can just go through and do it. I started this way. I'll try to do it with my cuts here. And let me count them as I do them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. "109 cuts right there." So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like 650 cuts. Something like that is what we did here. Yeah, it is pretty amazing how you can transform one material into another. That's what I love about miniatures, and I've said this before, and I will say it again. They are a form of surrealistic art. Surrealism in the sense that I'm explaining it, meaning things that are realistic in their nature or seemingly realistic, but are not actually possible in real life, or are made of things that aren't actually what they seem to be. So one of my favorite artists I've talked about on Instagram, his name is Chris Austin. I own one of his pieces. He loves to paint large predatorial animals in places they shouldn't be. Meaning he'll paint a great white shark floating through the redwood forest. Or he'll paint a pod of orcas swimming out of a forest fire. And it's a trip to see because he paints them realistically. He paints a realistic looking great white shark and a realistic looking birch forest. And you know the shark, in your brain, the shark is registering as real and the birch forest is registering as real, but you know they don't belong together. So it becomes surreal. And that is how I feel about miniatures. You get a material and you make it look like another material. And when you're done, that the thing looks like the real thing, but you know it's not the real thing. So it's taking real objects and making them look like other real objects. It's like the Is It Cake reels on Instagram. I mean, that's a quick and dirty version of it. I mean, not really for the person making the cake, of course, but you know, it looks like a real banana split, but when you slice it, it's actually a cake. And that's a form of surrealism too. It's not what it seems to be, but both things are true and they contradict because of how we know and relate them to one another. But there's some type of message in there, like in his, I don't know what Chris Austin means by all of his paintings. I haven't had a chance to personally talk to him. And of course, good art, people see different things in it. People feel different ways about it, and they should. You know, and sometimes, I mean, good art, that's good abstract and surreal art. Obviously, graphic art is still good art, and that's meant to be clearly just statements and bold informational with interest and draw your eye. So that's still good art, but in the form of sort of traditional art that's supposed to have meaning behind it, it's or subtext. You get to you can see different things in it. And so, and what I see in his art, with his orcas swimming out of a forest fire and polar bears walking down a snowy street in New York and giant groupers swimming in front of a telephone booth, I see the flipping upside down of the natural world because of humans' effect on it. And I see, to some degree, right? I see nature trying to find a new home. I see things of value that are important to the ecosystem being misplaced. I see sadness and for the fate of animals and the natural world. And I see a lot of his paintings too, they don't have any visible people in them except for one little kid he has in a yellow raincoat. So it's almost like retouching his innocence. You know, it's like putting the childlike self who would wonder and question things, but as you become an adult and you become integrated into society, you might forget to do that. You might just get used to what the normal thing is and stop asking the more important questions like, why are we here? What is our responsibility? Are these valid questions to ask? And things like that. And so he puts a child in there, almost like this child sees this. Why doesn't anybody else see this? This child is discovering something that's out of place. You know, I love his art because, I mean, you can go a lot of ways with that, but I own one of his pieces, and it's one of those pieces that I think it's beautiful, and at the same time it almost makes me cry. Hey, what's up, Hot Toys Hotline? Thanks for coming by, Connor. His pieces are beautiful and they make me cry at the same time. You know, I'm not like bawling, crying, but like internally there's like this sort of peace, but there's also a sadness, but there's also a like a desire to care for the animal, but at the same time it's a big predator, so it shouldn't need care. And then you relate to the child in the image because you remember what it was like discovering things. You remember what it was like the first time you set foot in a forest, or at least the feeling is there, you know, if you don't remember the experience. And I think his paintings do that for me. So with miniatures, I try to create feelings or moments, right? When I'm doing something where I'm trying to express something artistically, right? Or do that for somebody who's commissioned me to make a piece or do some work. Like the Chinatown diorama, if you're watching in the future times, I recently completed that. It's for a client in New York. And to create that piece and inform things so that they felt right to me, I went back, and I'm going to talk about this in a video that's coming up before the end of the month. I went back to a lot of my childhood memories of visiting Chinatown in San Francisco. I know this is for a New York Chinatown, but you know, there's obviously going to be a lot of similarities because it's the same culture, and they're at different ends of the country for similar reasons for the what they came, all the work they came here to do back in the day. And now you have these settlements with these pockets of culture. And I remember going to San Francisco with my dad when I was very young in the GT program. And I don't even remember what grade that was. I think it might have been like 4th grade or 3rd grade or something. And we went as a class to San Francisco, and I believe that was my first trip to San Francisco. No, I take it back. That was my second trip to San Francisco. My first trip was for a funeral for a family member who I unfortunately never met. They passed away before I got a chance to meet them. But I don't really remember the time we were in San Francisco. I remember being around San Francisco, like in Van Nuys and San Mateo and all these other places around that area. But the most vivid memories come from when I was in the GT program, and we walked across the Golden Gate Bridge for the first time. We went to Chinatown, and me and my dad discovered a Chinese bakery where we got these little sweet pork buns. You know, those steamed pork buns made of like a sweet dough, and they have sweet, like sort of a sweet barbecue pork inside of them. Me and my dad had never had those, and we bought them to try them. And to this day, they're one of my greatest food memories that I'll ever have. Walking around Chinatown with my dad and remembering the sights and sounds and smells. So when I designed that Chinatown diorama, I was thinking about those things. And I was thinking about what stood out to me, what things that would have stood out to me, or what types of feelings I remember that I could try to create in this scene. So I try to channel that sort of surrealism and vibes and energy into what I'm making when it's a meaningful piece. Even a dumpster, when I make miniature dumpsters, I try to imagine myself walking by a dumpster, throwing something away, you know, a smell, a sound, the clanging sound of the dumpster. How rusty is the dumpster? How rusty is it not? Etc., etc. So, yeah, that's my ramble, excuse me, about art for this stream. Go check out Chris Austin Art on Instagram. But miniatures are a form of surrealism. You're taking one thing, making it look like another. Both things are real. Both things exist, but they're kind of a contradiction of each other. You know, I like to joke when people comment on my Instagram reels where I'll throw my hand and do a scene and they go, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know that was real." And I'm like, well, it is real. It's just real small. Actually, we want to put that on a t-shirt. It is real. It's just real small. Referring to miniatures. I think that would be a funny t-shirt. Or it could say like, miniatures, they're real, they're just small. Something like that. Somebody go make a meme. I'll put it on a shirt. Almost there, guys. Told you this is the tedious part. Music helps. Or Euler talking about his feelings and thoughts about his trip to Chinatown. That trip we did to San Francisco was, this is a sneak preview for a future video you guys are getting here. We were with the GT program and the other kids, so my dad was assigned 2 other kids to watch while we were on that trip. And they were probably the 2 most hyperactive kids out of the whole bunch, and so they were always really frustrating to try to wrangle and deal with. And that Chinatown is when my dad was able to pawn those 2 kids off on another parent for a few hours, and we left the field trip, and just me and my dad, somebody's driving away, just me and my dad got to go to San Francisco, or Chinatown, and walk around alone and just have a good time. And then after that trip, me and my dad talked about for years, we got to get back to San Francisco and do all the stuff we didn't have a chance to do because we were on the trip. And we did that when I was about 14 years old. We went to Chinatown, and that is the rest of the story of that I will finish in my how to make miniature Chinese lanterns video that'll be coming out. The GT program is the Gifted and Talented program. I think it's called something else now. I think it's called like the Crazy Kids Who Can't Pay Attention in Class program or something like that. But that's what it's been for then. I think it's a new thing now. All right, so that is our carving. And you see how we got these like little cricks and cracks and breaks and little scrapes? That's not bad. That's good because it will just act as weathering and it will make the brick look more real. You can avoid that if you do deeper cuts and if you take more time, or if you use a hot knife to do all this scoring, you can avoid little breaks like that if you want more perfect brick. But in this case, I'm looking for some slight imperfection here and there. Okay, so this is where you can decide. You could just leave this like this because there's plenty of brick out there that it's perfect. It looks smooth or perfectly smooth, and just paint it. What is up, Jeff LeBaron? Psychic Studios is here, everybody. Another amazing. Speaking of art and artists, Jeff is an amazing artist, and he just started a YouTube channel, and he's showing off some really cool stuff over there. So shout out to Psychic Studios in the chat. Go check out Jeff's channel when you're done here. We can make a decision here. We don't have to add any more texture to this. We can paint this and it will look like brick. The thing is, it's going to look like new brick. So if you want to do an old building, this probably won't feel right if you just paint it from here and do the mortar over it. But if you want it to look like a newer brick, like you're doing a bank or an office building or something that's built in the last 40 years, that's probably you could probably just not texture this and move on. I do see a lot of guys at this point doing the foil ball thing or the rock thing. That is a way to add like a slight deviation in texture. That is a nice way to add slight texture that's not over the top. But I'm going to show you the way I like to do most of my brick, which is adding fine texture. So if we take our buddy Red here, and you see here's like the no texture that I'm talking about on the side here, like that's flat. You don't need to add a lot of texture to get that. But here, you can see there is a lot of texture. It's almost like leaning towards cinder block texture. And I like to try to emulate this look to some degree. I just think it makes the brick look even more real. Not all brick, but some brick looks great with this texture on it. And I do that with a brass wire brush. There it is. That's how I do it. And you're going to get a lot of variation, right? You see right here, the texture is a little bit deeper. Sometimes they're here. Yeah, Psychics, I use a lot of different things. This one, I'm just showing this method. So I know we talked a lot when you were working on that big alleyway diorama, and I'm sure you've discovered things that I don't know. So I plan on watching your videos here as I have time too. But yeah, there's about 1 billion ways to add texture. This is just the one to get a lot of the texture you see in the brick that I do. The Chinatown diorama that I did, the right side wall that's painted blue, this is how I did that texture over there. And you see there's a lot of small marks into the foam there. We're not going for every mark is visible, right? Because when you put a layer of acrylic paint over this, right, it's going to fill all those in a little bit. And then you put another layer, it's going to fill them in a little bit more. But this really gives you a look that emulates this to some degree. So, and as you hit this and tap this in, the same effect you would get with a foil ball or with a rock will automatically happen as you do this because of the different pressure being applied. You'll get the same effect with the fine texture coming from this. So if you leave it like this, this looks newer, right? But if you want it to look crumbly and old, I'm going to show you another thing you can do. Take this and hit it. So you see what I do right here? There's a divot. It's kind of hard to see, but I just basically punched in this portion of brick and this portion of brick. And what that'll do when you paint this and you scrape the mortar over it, you're going to have sunken in sections. And when you add weathering, it's going to lay or washes and weathering at the end to add like atmospheric effects and dust and stuff like that. It's going to be more random, and your eye's going to tell if you put a light on this. Like if you give this to a photographer, or you are the photographer or whatever, and you light this, it'll create just enough subtle variation to sell the idea that it's real brick that's had weight on it that has settled over time. Okay? Make sense? That is how I do that. So this is where I would leave you normally with, if you go to my other video, how to paint Hyperreal Miniature and Brick, I start from this point in that video. This is where I start in that video, from right here. All right, so this takes you to that. That video is linked below, by the way, if you have not seen that yet or need to watch it again, that's linked below. Yeah, this brush is from Harbor Freight Tools. Somebody mentioned that. You can get these at Harbor Freight for a couple of dollars. I will put a link below. I actually don't think I put one in before this stream. There's links to most of the other stuff, but I'll go back in the future times and there should be a link for one of these if you'd like to get one of these through my link. Otherwise, they have these at Harbor Freight. I think Home Depot has them as well. It's just for scrubbing stuff off of metal and, like, you know, scraping car battery acid and stuff like that. So this is the other one some of you guys might see. This is like a grill cleaning brush. You can do it with this too. Same dealio, but you got more bristles and you got a heavier hit with this. So the way it's spread out. So it's just a different feel. You can do that if you want to, you know, get two of these and go crazy. And so you can see how we're an hour and 15 minutes in here, but if I just did this without talking and focused on this, I think this would take me about 40 minutes, right? 144 square inches of brick. And I know most people's dioramas, you're going to do maybe one or two walls like this, or about twice this at the most. So a couple hours and you'll have some really, really nice hyper-realistic brick sculpted in to be able to add to. But I'm setting this up for the next stream here, where we're going to do a sidewalk. All right, so I want to finish this. So we started on this edge where it was nice and straight, but if you notice all my lines and you get down here, everything is out of place down here because this is not perfectly level. And I messed up my count, so I have this weird thing going on here. We're going to cover that up. So this is a piece of 1-inch foam that I cut, that is left over from some cuts that I did. I am going to not do that. Hold on. I'm going to shave off a little bit of this for a detail piece. And where's my big knife? So this is where I'm going to use my big knife. I'm going to just cut perpendicular to the foam, go about 3 times. You can do this on a hot wire cutter if you have one. I just figured it'd be good to show you guys how to do this without a hot wire cutter, because that's how most of us start. That's how I started. So I've got a slice of foam here. It's a nice clean edge because I have a nice new blade. I didn't push all at once. I did like 3 cuts and then I pressed down to finish the cut. That's a dragged edge right there with a dull blade. You can see what it does. You can actually utilize this though too. That actually looks like kind of a nice texture. If you sand that down, that can look like chips and stuff in the stone or masonry. I'm going to do this side though. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a little baseline here to intersect the bottom. And we're going to make it look like how real city workers build stuff. So my little skirt on the building, I'm going to just trim this off like that. And then I'm going to take my knife and I'm going to 45 this. Meaning I'm going to take a 45-degree angle cut off of it. Like that. See that? So that looks like a worker poured on concrete and then troweled it intentionally. I'm going to take some 120 grit sandpaper and I'm going to round over those edges. And that looks even more like weathered concrete. And then I'm going to take this static electricity. And I'm just going to, let's see, I'm going to trim this. I'm going to put in divisions because when you pour concrete, they put the linear division so that with swelling and water and growth and humidity, it's less likely to crack. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to go like every 4 inches. 1, 2, 3, 4, and just score a line. 1, 2, 3, 4. Score a line. That's good. And I could take my pen and drag a deeper cut, but I'm not going to because I want to differentiate this material from this material. I'm going to just have my knife line there, and this is where I've scored it in. So I'm going to leave that with that fine cut. So this material looks even more different than this material, but it still blends in. Before I lay this though, no, we can do this. We can keep going here. No, actually, I'm not going to glue this down yet. I'm going to do one more thing. So, one of the details that I did that a lot of people asked me about in the alleyway diorama that is in the hands of Eric Studdard. If you search Eric Studdard, E-R-I-K Studdard on Instagram, he has the first alleyway diorama I ever did. It's huge. It's like 48 inches, 36 inches by 32 inches. But there's these little divot out windows where like windows or detail would be in the wall. I'm going to show you guys how to do that really quick. So, here. Normally I would create a template. I'm going to go ahead and just sketch it on. If I was going to do multiples, I would create a template of what I'm about to do. So, I'm going to choose one of my lines in the brick as a guide, and you'll see why in a minute. I'm not just going to arbitrarily sketch this on here. I'm going to line this up with my cutting mat too, because I'm going to use that. There we go. Thank you guys for the likes again. I appreciate that. And I'm going to pick a line, maybe just right here, and then I'm going to probably not go in the center because that's kind of boring. I'm going to go offset. So I'm going to go right here, and I'm going to pick another line where I've scored these lines, and I'm just going to take my pencil. You could do this with a Sharpie too. Sharpies work great for this. And I'm just going to go up to where there's a point where I can stop naturally here. And I'm going to go over here, what feels right. Go up to a point where I can stop naturally. When I mean naturally, I mean where there's lines. I'm not creating a new line. And then I'm going to I'm going to go ahead and just freehand an arc here. Normally I would make a template separate on a piece of paper and trace it, but just to prove to you that you don't have to, we're going to do that. And then I'm going to take my sharp small blade and I'm going to do this. I'm going to start here and I'm going to cut through all the way like that. Oops. Cut was a hair off. That's okay. You could do this on a hot wire cutter too. Like you could run this in and then trace it with the hot wire. Just to prove though that you don't have to. We're going to trace my lines here. Again, you need an extendable blade for this, and you need a very sharp new blade. And you need to be careful and meticulous about it. So I'm going to start up here, drag a line down to here, careful not to cut too far, and then I'm going to kind of saw back and forth a little bit and let the knife do the work. And then I'm going to come in here like this. Finish the cut. Don't cut yourself, be careful. I'm going to go the other direction. Like that. You can see that it broke through on the other side right there. I do the same thing here. That broke through. I did this cut here so that it has some relief. If I left this solid, I could leave this together and do this cut, but I would be having to lift this up and like cut in, and I might have more jagged cuts and they might not be as straight. So I just did that. I found that giving it a little bit of relief cut at a natural line break that I can just re-glue really quick. Take that out of there. A natural break cut where I can just re-glue it actually helps me get straighter cuts and not break my foam or do something weird. Just a little thing I do. You don't have to do it, but it's just something I learned to do. It's an idea I got from woodworking techniques. They'll do certain cuts and certain types of joinery where they'll join certain things to specifically cause things to get tighter or looser so that it's easier to assemble. It won't matter. So there's that. Now, you can do this again without a hot wire cutter. A hot wire cutter would be much easier. But what I'm going to do now is, got to be careful. I'm going to use my big knife and I'm just going to slice all the way around here. Basically just halfway through the piece. I'm not worried about being perfect. And I'm just going to keep going. And you need to be careful because you don't want the knife sliding through. If you're under the age of 18, make sure you're doing this with an adult. I'm keeping my hand out of the way of the blade, especially as I cut deeper, because you don't want to slice through and cut your hand open. All right, now I'm going to just I keep placing it in that cut and just keep kind of sliding it through. Be careful with this, people, please. I am not responsible if you hurt yourself. This is why a hot wire cutter is safer. Come on, there. You can see what we're doing here. So now I'm just gonna get myself through the rest of the piece, like that. There we go. So you see how wonky that is? That's okay. This is gonna be on the back side. You can shave it down, clean it up if you want to. Right, but that's pretty close. That's not bad. It's actually better than I thought it was going to look. So if you had a hot wire cutter, you could put this up on the table and just run it through and plop, and then you have a perfectly flat cut. Just to show you that it is possible. Do not do that fast or unsafe or unsupervised. You don't want to slide through and cut your wrist, cut your hand. Don't be stupid, okay? You don't need no foam cutting heroes here, all right? All right, and then you can take this and you can plop that back in. But first, I'm going to go around the edges and do this. Carrying that brick over. I told you at the beginning we wouldn't need to worry about depth, but since we're doing a cutout, we need to pay attention to the detail on the depth of the piece. We want it to look hyper real. Okay. Don't forget to texture it. plop it back in. Oop, got some little tear outs up here. Pop it back in. There's a little overcut there because I got in a hurry. You can see that there. That's okay though. When I fill that all in with mortar, I can kind of hide that. I can tear that off and go, look at that brick chipped right there. And then we can take our EPS glue. I can put some glue here where we need it. And some glue in here. Okay, put that back in there. I don't leave any glue down there. And then I'm going to put some glue down here. Whoops. Oh, I did the wrong side. Whoops, that's okay. See? That's what happens when you get in a hurry. I cut it facing the wrong way. That's okay. I can fit it another way. Alright, this is our piece that we cut for down here. And to hold this seam together, I just use some safety pins. Not safety pins, but sewing pins. Just like that. Make sure I don't have any glue drying on my new mat here. Stupid foam. Alright. So this is the top that was off. So what we can do up here is add a different detail. So I have this 1/2-inch piece of foam. Let me just cut a slice off of this. See, we have one textured side because that was the factory edge. There's my cut. Nope, that's not my cut. There's my cut. There's my clean cut edge. We have this heated factory edge. Guess what? It's already got texture on it. So if we just flip it out this way, we can hide our crimes. Place this there. And then I'm going to cut this every 1.5 inches. Small knife. And I'm going to go ahead and do the pen thing for the fun of it. And I'm going to go ahead and cut a piece of it off to make it look like it busted out. Same thing down here. There we go. There's a little bit of a crumbly, crusty detail there. There's our brick detail up there, utilizing texture that was already there. It's a piece that broke off. Another piece that broke off. And then we let that dry. We got ourselves a Hyperreal basic back wall. And obviously you could do more to this. You could add more brick detail, more extruding brick. You could add a sill, you could add a cornice, or not a cornice, but like a fanned out lintel top. You could add piping, you could do whatever. That is how I do Hyperreal Miniature Brick. Regardless of what these guys say. That's how I do it. Okay guys, that is the Hyperreal Miniature Brick tutorial. You can see the divot right there with the lighting at this angle. So I will probably add a few more little things to this later, but next week we're going to do 2 streams in a row. Next week, Sunday at 5 o'clock, we're going to do the street, or the street, the sidewalk, all right? And then we'll glue this to the base, all right? And I'll probably leave it unpainted for demonstration purposes, but that is the basic idea of how to do basic, standard, what is it called again? A running brick pattern. I couldn't remember it. A running brick pattern. And yeah, that is how I do it. That's the basics. You can do a lot more than this if you want to do even more and create other textures, but that's how to get started doing Hyperreal Miniature Brick texture, sculpting, scaling. You can apply this to any scale with the same tools. I mean, if you go to like half scale, you might have to texture it differently. But this texturing method works all the way up to 1/6 scale really, really well. And all the way down to 1/24 and 1/48 scale. I haven't gone down, I shouldn't say 1/48. I haven't gone that small. But try it. Let me know how it turns out. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for the likes. Thank you for being subscribers. For those of you who just caught this art in real time for the first time or don't know, this is episode 40, meaning there is a live stream playlist, and you can see, I think, about 10 live streams still over there, but there is over 30 live streams for art in real time available in the members only section if you're interested in that. And there are videos made exclusively for members and even more exclusively for the workshop masters who are channel members in that tier. I've got a video for both of them coming out soon, and early access for channel members, and one for the workshop masters coming out before the end of the year, about my trip to Chinatown and my Chinatown diorama. And if that's something you're interested in, go check it out. Either way, thanks for being here, and I'll see you next week. You guys are awesome. Bricky out.